The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Oh, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, May the 21st, 2026. This is Financial Rebellion, and we're live here with Catherine Austin-Fitz, with Carolyn Bett, and we have the amazing Renette as well. Thank you for coming back, Renette. We need
Oh, it's my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, so let's go to our news first and discuss this as a team. So first up on our news is, duty to disobey, and you're all doing so well. Special shout out to Soleri for promoting Duty to Disobey because you really helped us and it shot the ticket sales went up through the roof. So most of the theatres have tipped. There are a few that haven't, including Florida, which I find very extraordinary. They're normally our first up there. So we've got till the 28th to tip those theatres. So get on to dutytodisobeyfilm.com and it's a very important film.
So, Polly, can you just say 1 minute about what it's about? Because I think this topic is so important and very timely.
Okay, so it's called Duty to Disobey for a reason. So the military have a duty to disobey an illegal order. And the COVID-19 vaccine, all of these troops got ready to go and have their vaccine. They never disobey an order, but they found out that the vaccine that was being given to the military was not approved. It was emergency use authorization. They were lied to. And so they stood back and said, this is an illegal order. We will not take the emergency use authorization vaccine. And you will then see what happened to them in the film when they stood back and said, we're not doing it. And it's horrific. No humans should treat any human like this. So if you think we had it bad out in the public space, they had it 20 million times worse in the military. And it's important we see this because we need our military, we need a defense. And what you'll see at the end of this film is not one of those people who love their jobs in the military would ever let their children join the military as it stands today. So we have a massive problem in the military right now with all the mandates for the vaccines, but particularly the emergency use authorization, which they were lied to. And so that's what you're going to see in the film. And it's quite incredible. And I'm glad we uncovered it, to be honest with you. And word on the street is that Pete Hegseth's team have seen this film and he's getting ahead of the film and he's out there now saying we're going to do everything we can. Everything we're asking for call to action in this film is being discussed by Hegseth right now. So that is interesting. So yes.
So it matters. The more people who go to see it, the more they buy tickets, the more this gets promoted, the more pressure on the military to do the right thing. And as you say, we have to do the right thing because this is destroying or getting rid of our best soldiers.
Right. And also what happens in the military, if they're successful and get away with it, tends to spill out onto us. Right. So we need to be keeping our eye on what's happening there. And plus, the biggest fact is we shouldn't be treating our brothers and sisters like this. It's just abuse. It's barbaric abuse. And it needs to stop.
Right.
So there's that. Right. Next bit of news. Okay. So HHS releases Surgeon General's warning on screen time for kids. Now, this is hugely important because we all know the dire situation that the world is in, not just America, with the children addicted to screen time. And I might just add on that, I have noticed that parents, if you go out in the world, you can see in a restaurant, parents are also addicted, which is not great for the children. So it's a massive addiction all around of screen time. What do you have to say about this, team?
Well, neurologically, it sets children up also for other addictions. You are literally creating different pathways in their brain that is going to make life very difficult. So it goes beyond even the screen time. Later on, you can see it pop up with other addictions.
So my concern is also that when I always use the example of Spectre from the James Bond movies, which is the global criminal organization. You're giving Spectre 24/7 access to your children, including their subconscious. So if you look at the high tech being used to create these addictions, it's not any simple thing. You're talking about very, very powerful technology. And it's not surprising. I was just out in Silicon Valley. People in Silicon Valley who make this stuff don't let their children use it. So it's that, that is the big tell. And I'll never forget reading various books about, children who have been interested in doing sort of very unhealthy things. And the advice you always hear them say is never give your child a smartphone, which is never put your child on a screen. So this is really dangerous technology.
And we get so many messages in at Children's Health Defence where people ask parents, they say, how can you help us? When we take away the iPad or whatever it is they've got, the tantrums, the meltdowns, the violence that is coming from these young children because they're so addicted when it takes away. And to the point where some young adults, young children are actually have committed serious crimes and have been put away because of the screen time. That's how serious this is.
Right. Well, it teaches violence, among other things. So, I mean, one thing I've seen is families who are successful in stopping this addictions or avoiding these addictions, they are excellent at keeping their kids outdoors. You know, they are outdoors, they are doing sports, they are skiing, they are riding, they are hiking, they are outdoors, and they are outdoors with their friends. They want to be with their friends. And if you look at a lot of the surveys and polls, kids get online so they can be with their friends because they're not free to roam given where they live. So get your kids outside and get them outside with their friends. That's what they need.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and we covered an ex post yesterday that is a whole series of public school teachers who are saying they're quitting. And describing that the children are not like they used to be in school. They have no attention span. They're misbehaving. They're not doing their homework. And these are young teachers who look really bright and ready to conquer the world. And they're saying, "I've had it. I can't do this," and walking away. So that has a lot to do with the cell phones.
Right.
And the content is horrific as well. I was with a young mother who said, well, my child watches, I think it was Peppa Pig, a British show, and that's fine. And I sat there while Peppa Pig got vaccinated. I mean, it's like, this is like brainwashing beyond belief. So no,
Well, apparently in America, the average age when kids start watching porn is 11.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very, very bad for them.
Yeah.
And I think Renette's point is to me the important one. This addiction sets you up for many other bigger addictions down the line. You know, if you want your child to learn how to be powerless, here's the pathway.
All right, so hopefully more to come on that. We must cover more on screen time as well. All right, let's move on to the next headline, please, Lou. Okay, so Children's Health Defence seeks to force FCC to comply with 2021 ruling. Carolyn and Renette, or anybody, what have you got on that?
Well, the FCC has not come out with new guidelines saying what is a dangerous level of radiation exposure, and I would doubt that even the old ones were accurate in terms of the damage that can be done. But Children's Health Defense is taking action to try to get the FCC not to go any further until they make a new determination based on the assumptions of the technology and the different types of EMF that are now in the environment, because the old determinants are just not applicable anymore.
I recommend going to 704nomore.org. That is where it's a national committee that in their educational resources, they have all these different type of PDFs that you can download, print out, hand to people, send to your city council members and county supervisors, and really educate them on the dangers, because we are definitely in a dangerous no man's land right now with the FCC.
And Renette, someone asking, what does 704 mean?
704 is the section in the 1996 Telecommunications Act that essentially is what needs to be updated. And that's also what it allows all these terrible things, like you can't talk about biological and environmental effects and so on. So they really want to get rid of the 704. That's why they say 704 no more. It's a section within that act that needs to be removed and updated.
Okay. All right, next article headline, please. All right, well, this is important. Kentucky Thomas Massie, he charted his own way until toppled by Trump. That was devastating to watch. But Catherine, you may have a different take on this.
Yeah, so I'm optimistic given the results. Obviously, it was extremely important that Massie win, But as he pointed out, he has 7 more months in Congress. And if you think he was unleashed before, he's unleashed now. But the other thing he did is through the campaign, he has built a terrific national base. If you look at the results are very interesting. He was polling 30 points or more ahead in under 30. And if you look at the election, because it was a primary, only voters who were registered last December could vote. And that meant the vast majority of people under 30 in his district could not vote. It was 23,000 that could vote. And of course, that group tends to not go out and vote. If you look at the age breakdown, he won in every age category except 65 and older. What that means is, it's a little bit, we talked about Dennis Kucinich run in 2024 in Ohio as an independent. In 30 or under, or no, sorry, 25 or under, he and his team did a survey, and they found that only if you look at 25 and under, 4 had registered as Republicans, 4% had registered as Democrats, and 92% had registered as independent. And what you're watching is people on the right and left fed up and gathering to oppose what I call the control grid. And it's I've been on the road now. I've been in California, I've been in Maryland, I've been in New York, I've been in Hawaii, and everywhere you go, the young people have had it and are just rejecting the uniparty, and they're doing it in a very positive way. So if you look at Massie's results, it says to me, first of all, I'm shocked he didn't win. And the question was it a fair election? And the answer is, I doubt it. But if you look at what happened, you literally had a small handful of billionaires literally forcing, putting up millions and millions of dollars. This is the single most expensive congressional campaign in the history of the country. But it was basically a handful of billionaires against the people of Kentucky. And the question is, could the people of Kentucky be forced to either rig the election or vote for whoever does the most sort of dirty ads? If you look at the ads, they were so misleading, so dirty. It was extraordinary. But what I'll say in that above 65 group, has basically been trained, particularly in the South, to vote in whatever way AIPAC wants them to vote. And this is very unfortunate. It's very funny in his concession speech. Massie said, I'm sorry to be late in giving my concession speech, but I had to find Ed, his the guy running against him, to concede the election to him. And it took me so long to find him in Tel Aviv. And so literally you have a clear message to the young people that you are being controlled by billionaires and foreign interests, and there's no fair elections in the United States. And so that allows us to move out of the paradigm that we can vote our way out of this problem into a paradigm we have to take action across the board, including moving and shifting the money. So to me, and I think if you look at Massie's concession speech, it was very gracious. If you look at what he's going to do next for 7 more months in Congress, you're watching a movement of the young people breaking out of the uniparty paradigm and ready to bring about real change. So I'm very enthusiastic about the results of this election.
I couldn't believe the abuse that was hurled at him. I haven't seen that for some time. I was like, he must be just saying something that's true for that amount of abuse to be hurled at you. That the attention.
Well, the fact that they didn't find anything on him means that he is a clean person. They did not find any dirt, real dirt.
Right. So if we have an article on the Washington War Machine versus Massie that we had Taylor Hudak do, I strongly recommend it. It's really, really excellent. And Lou is looking for it. He'll bring it up. But we go through his whole history. And I would say Massie's number one priority is local food and allowing farmers and ranchers to process food locally and sell it locally. That very much busts the central control model. He's done a lot to stop the vaccine mandates and compromise of health freedom. He's done a lot to require disclosure, including the Epstein files. Here's the Washington War Machine versus Thomas Massie. And it's a very in-depth piece. It goes through all the different fights he's had. He's tried to stop the national security surveillance state from, doing all sorts of surveillance. Anyway, if you go down and you look at all the different issues, he's been fighting the pro-centralization model again and again and again, which is why the billionaires don't like it. And the people who are really trying to build the digital control grid. If there's anyone in Congress who's stood up against the digital control grid in all its different parts, it's Massie. And that's what this fight is.
And for
Right.
constitutional rights. He's a strict constitutionalist.
Right. And he's been very effective at complaining about the illegal, the federal government is being run financially as a criminal enterprise. It's operating way outside the financial management laws. And he's pointed that out and, done a whole series of things there. So this is a guy who's for the Constitution and against corruption. And the people who are for corruption and against the Constitution, targeted him. And it was beautiful in the fact that finally you could see it clearly. If you look at who came at him and how they came at him, there was nothing legitimate there. It was a bunch of organized crime guys trying to get their way. And it was obvious, it was simple. And I think if you look at the response to the process and the election, I feel like we're finally getting ready for a real breakout. And Massie's emerged as a national leader, who is pro the rule of law, is the only way I can say it. And the people against him, as far as I'm concerned, are pro crime.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Now I'm going to read this little clip, and then we're going to go to, actually going to go to a clip. So it's Clayton Tucker. They found a loophole the tech barons didn't expect. One county used the 2024 NDAA to stop a data center because these projects depend on foreign supply chains to China. If we organize, we can protect our land, our water, and our future. Take a look at this clip.
There is a county that stopped a data center because of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. The act says that if you build anything related to national security, that it cannot use any components from China. All data centers have components from China. That's how the supply chains work. So they were able to sue them and got them stopped for that reason.
Wow.
This is so interesting, Polly, because if you look at the people who want to build a control grid, they're always using China as a stalking horse. And so, in fact, my understanding is that, in many data centers, you have as much as 30 to 50% of the supply chain coming from China. And so it's really clever. The national security state excuse has had the China turned on them. So this is quite a clever tactic, and everybody should consider it.
We were discussing earlier before we went live how, as scary as these data centers are, this is the first time I have ever seen in my political history both the left, which is more the environmentalists, and the right, which is more about small government and not overreach of government, that are coming together as a unified voice. And this is truly the silver lining. This is where there's no difference. Nobody cares about your political standing. Nobody cares about what sexual orientation you are or what party you're with. They're just like, no, this is on our doorstep, and we're saying no, and it's a unified voice. So this has been extraordinary, and I think that once again, the oligarchs, Silicon Valley, they've overstepped their boundaries, and people are really pushing back intelligently. And so I think they've overstepped themselves, and we're seeing the results, which is quite fantastic, to be quite frank.
Do we have any other headlines, Lou? Oh, well, here we go, of course.
Yes.
Auto industry braces for more motor oil shortage. Well, Renette, what's the latest? What's going on?
Well, do you want me to go into the whole entire thing or just this topic alone?
This topic and then the whole entire thing.
Well, I mean, this is just one little tiny drop in the oil bucket, essentially. So there's a memo out saying essentially motor oil. So when you go to get your oil exchanged, at your local mechanic, they're not going to have your motor oil. And so it's not just about we're running low on gas or we're running out of diesel. It's like you're not going to be able to actually change out your oil in your car and your trucks and your and your big semi trucks as well. So we'll get more into that. But it's it's not linear. What we're seeing is not linear, and we'll kind of get into why that is and what that looks like.
So do we need to go back to horse and cart?
Do we need, no, we don't, but we have to use what time we have right now to actually get ready to buffer ourselves. And again, that's also kind of complex, and that comes with a host of its own, problems, but happy to get into that right now if you guys want to jump in. It's a big topic.
Please do educate us, yes.
Well, let's start with the term of the day, shall we, Lou? So we have a critical threshold, and I know that we had Carolyn say, well, what is that? Well, essentially, this is what we are now facing, and this is the point at which a system loses enough stability or redundancy that small additional stresses can trigger really rapid cascading disruptions. And so essentially, what I'd love to do is, if you don't mind, Lou, is put up that graph, that Bloomberg graph. So modern civilization operates through tightly connected systems, and that includes energy and food and transportation and water and logistics and communications, and as well as emergency infrastructure like firefighting and so on. But what happens is that when our oil and gas and diesel inventories shrink, this redundancy, this buffer disappears, and these multiple stresses start to occur simultaneously. So systems can approach a critical threshold where even relatively small little disruptions can create large downstream effects. So this discussion is not really about just gasoline prices or consumer inconvenience or politics. It's really about system fragility. It's infrastructure dependence, shrinking energy buffers, and really a complex system of the modern industrial system. So when people think of civilization, they think, oh, it runs on electricity. But really, modern civilization runs on diesel, natural gas, electricity, logistics, and this continuous synchronization between all of them. It's not one or the other. So with that graph that you're seeing, essentially what you're seeing is let's bring that back again. I was kind of doing an intro. This is a major Bloomberg, JP Morgan, though I'm not a fan of, oil inventory analysis. And this just came out, and it's brought attention to something far more important than oil prices. So this is actually the physical inventory thresholds. And according to this graph, world oil inventories that we know of are falling at a record pace. So the white line that you see towards the top, that actually represents the total visible global oil inventories in billions of barrels. And inventories reportedly peaked shortly before the Iran conflict that escalated in February of this year. And then it began to fall rapidly, as you see. So this framing is that the world has burned through oil inventories at a record speed as the Iran war is throttling all the oil flows from the Persian Gulf. So what happens is that you have governments and you have industries, they're left with fewer options, and to cushion impact of the loss, of more billions of barrels, we don't have them. The production is not there. So what you're seeing in these two different lines. So the two major thresholds are identified. The one is called operational stress levels, and that's projected to be 7.6 billion barrels, and that's going to happen in June, coming up this June in a few days. Then what happens, and that's when you start to see some interruptions, but then what you have is what's called operational floor level. That's when we get to 6.8 billion barrels, and that's defined as the minimum level needed to maintain stable refinery and pipeline operations. And that is projected in September of 2026, assuming there's no conflict resolution, which I don't see that anytime soon. So I do want to be clear, this is not about oil price targets or market speculation or political, talking points. These are basically the physical infrastructure and inventory thresholds. And now what I want to say, though, is that they're saying September. Once municipalities, once counties, once states, once industries and citizens start to realize, we're running out of the motor oil to change the oil in my car, people are going to start hoarding and getting these things. So I think September is more of a best case scenario, if we don't have peace in the Middle East, because you're going to see that the number of barrels is going to drop even more significantly because people are going to be trying to create a buffer for themselves. So essentially, we're not going to see civilization collapse overnight, but what you're going to see is you're going to see systems become more brittle. They're going to be less adaptive. They're going to be less resilient, and they're going to be much, much more vulnerable to cascading disruptions. And so the inventories get affected because you lose your shock absorbers, essentially, right? Having the surplus is the shock absorber for civilization. And when that shrinks, then flexibility shrinks and emergency responses, like the capacity to respond, shrinks. And the margin of error also becomes much thinner too. So I don't know if you guys have any questions. I just kind of
So let me bring up one thing. We put together a timeline of all sabotage of energy production, distribution, refining, as well as trade bottlenecks. It's up at Solari. Maybe low, energy infrastructure and trade route disruption. We published as of May 4th. And it's important to understand that if you look at that September deadline that Renette just spoke about, much of the focus is on what is happening in the Straits of Hormuz and how that is shutting down the oil trade and the ancillary supply chain effects. But we're not just talking about what's happening at the Strait of Hormuz. If you look around the world, we have Ukraine affecting the availability of Russian oil and gas, and that's affecting supplies. But we have trade bottlenecks or trade route changes all around the world. Right. And we also have sabotage of energy production, refining all around the world. And what you'll see is we are watching a global war that is literally shutting down or slowing down the delivery of oil, gas, and fossil fuel supplies. Now, in the middle of this, the U.S. is energy independent, but that doesn't make it price independent. And it doesn't make it supply chain resistant, as Renette. So the thing to understand is this is not just about the war in Iran. This is a global war, and it's happening all over the place, including with United States infrastructure as well. So this is not going to be over anytime soon.
Well, and we were talking beforehand too, it's okay. So people are saying, well, don't we produce our own oil? Aren't we have oil production refineries everywhere, though some of them are being blown up. But the thing is that this oil is on the market. It goes to the highest bidder. And so while we are producing oil, that doesn't mean Americans are going to be getting it. And the petroleum companies really don't care. This is about going to the highest bidder. So yeah, we're producing it.
Right. Energy independence is not price independence.
No.
Right. Well, and there have been something like 45 oil refineries that have been burned or blown up or, otherwise taken off the grid in the last 3 months or something like that.
So we're seeing energy rationing around the world. It started in other places. We haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in the United States yet. But, the first day, literally March 1, I said to John Titus on Money Markets, this is COVID 2.0, because as the rationing rolls out, we are going to see the same process that we saw in COVID, which is rationing to Main Street and injection of resources into Wall Street. This is a plunder. This is potentially a serious plunder scenario.
Yeah, totally agree. And so I want to let people know when we usually think of oil shortages, we think of gasoline shortages. And what really spurred this conversation today was that, a couple of weeks ago, we had our last, shipment of diesel to California. And it's not like we're never going to have diesel shipped here again, but there's nothing, down the pipes right now. So people are really focused on the gasoline, but diesel literally fuels the physical, the industrial civilization, essentially, right? So diesel powers, a freight trucking, agriculture, refrigerated transport, ports, rail freight, construction, mining, utility repair fleets, backup generators, emergency infrastructure, military logistics. So this is huge. And gasoline, well, that's more for commuters, right? So we keep thinking, gas, how am I going to get around? It's like, well, what's going to support the infrastructure? And so, diesel affects our food, our freight, our infrastructure, our systems, continuity. And even the California Energy Commission itself said, diesel powers nearly all of our heavy duty trucks. It's our ships, it's our rail. farm equipment and the construction system. So, a gasoline shortage that interrupts, us getting back and forth to our jobs, but it's much different with the diesel.
So
And as
Renette,
you were-
let me just ask you, because the reports we get from the heartland is farmers cannot afford to plant. If you look at what they have to pay for energy
Right.
and what they have to pay for fertilizer under these circumstances,
Right.
there's no way they can make a profit from planting. And so,
Not now, and the planting for the 26-27 season it's already happened. It hasn't
Right.
happened, right? We've already
Right.
missed it. So
Right.
we're not speaking in theory. We're letting you know ahead of schedule that we've missed the planting season and they can't afford it. The fertilizer is not available, and you have to act accordingly. You have to go local.
right.
Right. And you were mentioning too, Catherine, the COVID, the COVID was really a systems warning. So, COVID demonstrated, something extremely important, which is, modern systems behave non-linearly, right? So the US did not just lose 50% production or 50% trucking or 50% labor. The disruption still, create, even the small disruption we had was like 8 or 9%, created empty shelves. It created shipping congestion and semiconductor shortages and fertilizer problems and hospital strains. And that was supply instability. I mean, inflation, all these things, right? Global logistical stress. And that was with a much more minor disruption that we're still kind of recovering from. And the reason why this is because we have been quite reliant upon just-in-time inventory, right? Synchronized logistics and minimal redundancy. And these are all tightly coupled systems, right? They're all tightly interlinked with each other. So a 10% disruption does not necessarily create a 10% effect, right? Small disruptions can be amplified downstream, can amplify downstream instability essentially. So, and what I was pointing out in my Substack is California is uniquely buffered, yet still very vulnerable in a really interesting way. So we're one of the more interesting states in that, we have high vulnerability and we also have an unusual resiliency as well. So we're vulnerable because we're an energy island, which people are like, what do you mean by that? So we have limited pipeline connectivity to the rest of the US. We have specialized fuel blends that no other state has. We have declining refinery capacity, especially over the last couple of years. We've closed down refineries. Interestingly enough, we're a heavy import dependence. We get a lot of our oil through the back channels through Russia, ironically, while we're all being, environmentalists. I don't think that's very environmental to get our oil from Russia, but we do. And then we also have a massive, massive population density. And of course, we have this wildfire and grid vulnerability, which we lose power here in Northern California, really out of the year, weeks at a time. It's insane. And we're going into a high El Nino season. So they expect it to be very dry and volatile and lots of winds and storms. So that's not good. And so California also depends heavily on continuous logistics and ports, and this whole synchronized supply chain is highly, highly complicated. And so this really kind of compounds the events in that fuel stress, wildfires, electricity blackouts, refinery outages, shipping disruptions. This can all happen at the same time. But we're also buffered because we've built one of the largest renewable diesel systems in the country. So we've got renewable diesel and biodiesel, which is comprises a large portion of the California diesel pool. However, it's not like we're just dependent on electricity, or we're just dependent upon natural gas, or we're just dependent upon diesel, or just dependent upon gas. You have this whole entire chain, all these different links, right? That, you have natural gas, but you need diesel, right, to back it up, or to go offline for your generators, or you have to have the transportation or for the repairs. And so what I try to say to people, when they're like, well, look at, for instance, cities, a lot of cities now are using natural gas, right? They're using natural gas for their sewage and for their water and for, for their waste management, right? To remove your trash and recyclables. But what people don't realize is within that whole entire chain, all you need is for one link to be removed and the whole chain just falls apart. It just stops. And that's what people don't realize. It's highly, highly complex. And so while we're building up all this biodiesel and, we're all sustainable fuels, great. However, in order to make those things work, you're still dependent upon diesel trucks and earth movers and bulldozers and so on. And so we're going to see those interruptions. And it's not going to happen all at once, but you're just going to see a little disruption here, something slowing down there. You're going to see, price spikes over here. You're going to probably first start seeing store shelves starting to go empty, and things not being delivered on time.
So, Renette, one thing I want to point out, we just did an interview with Craig Tyndale, who had a great article called Hard Bifurcation. And what he describes, and I think it's very important for everybody to understand, is we went through a period where money would buy stuff. If you needed a hard asset, you could buy it with money, or it might raise the price, but it was available. Now we're going into a world where there's a bifurcation between real assets and financial assets, and money won't necessarily buy something. If the Chinese won't sell you rare earth minerals, then you're not going to get enough rare earth minerals to keep your army and national security going. So there's a bifurcation in the global economy. The reason this is important, because it's both tariff and then now what's happening with the energy global war, whatever it is we've seen it from 1980 on with globalization, millions of products organized to literally pull their parts from many different places around the world because we had a global model and the trade routes were protected. Once that model breaks down, you can have 100 supply chains coming from 20 places each, internal to the supply chain. And as you said, the whole supply chain has to reprice. And what that means is thousands of products that were economic in the old model suddenly stop being economic in the new model. So we're just reading about a rice farmer in Asia who can't plant rice because she'll make 22,000, but given the energy and fertilizer prices, it'll cost her 33,000 to plant. And so, food independence or energy independence is not price independence. And that is going to wreak havoc with supply chains in ways that we don't begin to understand, because it's going to impact almost every product and service that we use. So, and basically what you've done is you've engineered massive centralization, and now what makes sense economically is decentralization. But that means local food, local energy, local action, all these different things. And so what Renette is telling you is, this repricing from global to local is coming. The way the leadership is handling it is they're just going to put a control model in and try and do total central control. We reject that, but the way to make yourself resilient is to say, okay, food, energy, shelter, whatever I need, community, how am I going to find that locally? And, we're back to a world where jurisdiction matters hugely.
Correct. And globalism destroys community, right? So we're seeing the death of globalism as we know it. And that means we got to go back to community, period, right? And the first thing that will be affected for sure, because it's already being affected. It's not like in the future. It's like we know right now, we've passed the planting season. The farmers have said we can't plant, we can't afford it, we don't have the fertilizer. It's done. So we already know food's going to be disrupted. So this is everyone's cue right now. If you're hearing this and people are like, I don't know what to do. Well, first of all, you just don't go this alone. It's not about you having to go every single thing that you need to have. It's like you get together with your neighbors, family, your church, your friends, your school, whatever it is, and you start being really strategic. Like I have the kind of soil and sunshine where I can grow the tomatoes. You can grow the potatoes. You can have the worm farm. And then you learn how to barter, or as I was saying in another show we did, time banking. Time banking is a great way to really supplement and leverage the dollars that you do have. And so, because what you have to understand is once the diesel kind of starts to slow down, you don't have the harvested food. You don't have the refrigerated transport to get to your stores. You don't have, the warehouses are no longer functioning, right? The grocery deliveries are not happening. So agriculture is the first thing that's going to be affected. So when you start seeing interruptions in agriculture, in the stores and what's on the shelves, that's your cue. Like, you better be ready. You better get ready right now. And again, just start talking to people. If you're in your own mind and you're freaking out, this is not about a freak out. This is where you start to have conversations. And I've made it a really big thing. Like we have Mexican crews are coming and building a fence on the side of our house so we can grow some food. And I'm talking to them like, hey, do you guys know what's going on? Do you understand what's difficult? We have another fence that needs to be repaired. I don't have money to repair it right now. However, we're buying the materials now, and then we're gonna have the guys come back in 2 months when I can afford to have it built, right?
Right.
The other thing we're doing is my partner and I have identified, okay, what appliances do we need to have replaced? I'm getting a new dishwasher next week. My roof, June 1st, I'm getting a new roof. I'm like, you know what? It's already starting to fall apart. Yeah, I could probably push it 1 to 2 years. We've ordered it. We've got it. They're coming in next week. So you have to really, really do an assessment on your own priorities, on your property, where you live, where you're renting. You have to look at your neighborhood. You even have to look at your watershed, like what you have within your watershed, your region, and so on. And then you need to start speaking to your neighbors and your friends and your churches and say, hey guys, and it starts with communication. That's where it starts.
So in Hickory Valley, we used to have a potluck dinner every month where you have to eat dinner. So we know you're all busy, but everybody brought something. And each month we would have one person basically brief us on how to do all the different things we needed to be much more resilient in our community.
Right.
And it got everybody talking, and every dinner was very useful. I learned a tremendous amount, and we can really help each other. And part of it was just identifying the people who, whether it was food or medicine or health or all the different talents that we needed, we just identified and shared those. So
Well,
just start.
it goes back to the SWOT analysis, right? That we always did it as a city every 6 months, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And you can do that within your own group, and you can do it more casually, but you can go around each person saying, well, what skills do you have? Or what, like, for instance, we have someone in our group has their own fire engine. God bless them. And so we got someone with a fire engine. That's great. Don't know if he's going to have diesel, but nonetheless. But and like who has the medical skills, right? Who's the herbalist? Who knows how to grow what? Who knows how to can? Who knows how to dry? Or also, like for instance, I have it where I have a little nitrogen tank, and I can actually seal up food with little nitrogen packs. And so, because this is the thing, is your power and your strength is in your numbers at a local level, and you have that time. And I'm telling you, when you talk about the potlucks, that's when you feel good. When you have those potlucks, you're not going it alone. And when we established this with COVID, we started having potlucks every single Monday starting in March of 2020. And even though these aren't our besties and we're talking to them every single day, when somebody's sick, when somebody is dying or has died, or there's some kind of emergency, we know we rally. We are each other's safety nets. And this is what we have time to establish right now.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
You are not alone. And so people, when they get frozen, like, I don't know where to start. You simply start with talking, and you just point to what's going on. And maybe people aren't going to really hear you, but when they show up at the grocery store and they notice the store shelves are a bit thinner than usual, that is a perfect time to really get that conversation going in high gear.
Right.
But nonetheless, you don't have to wait. You just start, learning, buy some books, how to grow food, right? How to raise chickens. Make sure that you prepare, like we're preparing our property, where the deer don't come in and have dinner every night.
We have a big fight with the deer here.
Oh yeah, I do too, and I just won the war. There's no offense there; they can no longer hop over. So these are the things you do. And then the other thing that's really important is, as a former elected official, I can tell you, most city council members, most county officials are not paying attention to global issues and trends and so on whatsoever. So I really do encourage everyone to take the link to this URL, to this video here, this conversation, and send it to your city council members and your county reps, and go to public comment and say, do you realize what's going on? This is where you need to look and do an analysis of your wastewater, of your sewage, of your emergency response. Police and fire and our air tankers are highly dependent upon diesel. And so I'm quite frightful for California, especially in the West Coast and so on. Actually, all of America, because everyone's in drought. The response time and the ability to use the tankers to have the air attack hit the fires really fast and put them out. So this is where you need to actually be the foghorn for your local representatives and say, look you have literally about a month or two to get your act together. And that's also why when I look at that Bloomberg graph, it's like, oh, it looks like September is going to be a critical month. I'm like, no, it's going to be sooner than that, because when more and more industries and cities and counties start to become aware of what's going on, they're going to start creating the buffer. And that means that stuff's going to be drawn down even faster.
Right.
And so time is of the essence, but you approach it calm, cool, collectively, but you go to your cities, you go to your counties, and you let them know and you give them this information saying, folks, you may not be aware of this, but the clock is ticking. And that's where what you say at public comment could save your city, could really.
Yeah, so let me just bring something up. I know you interviewed with Elsa. We're about to publish a major piece called Mr. Global in Your Street, all about taking local action and how effective it can be. In the old days, Renette, we used to have community papers who would report on all the meetings and what was going on at the municipal level, at the county level. And so you had a reporter or a group of reporters covering it for everybody.
Yeah.
And as the community papers died down and went on the internet, that got lost. And so we have major municipal and county budgets and things like the school board, major money, major operations, and we're not able to watch them. And so one of the things Elsa recommends is crowdfund a community reporter. Everybody put together, $5 or $10, get together and pay somebody to go to all these meetings and keep the group posted on what in the heck is going on. Because if you look at a lot of your resources at the local level, they're in these local governments and organizations. And what we're seeing with the data centers or the flock cameras is people get surprised that these contracts get let before they even hear about it. That can't happen if you're watching. The other thing is, if you are watching and paying attention, there's a huge amount of resources in many places that can be dramatically improved in how they're being used and spent. So I know you know about participatory budgeting, and we cover it in Mr. Global in Your Street, but there's a lot citizens can do to dig in and look at what the resources are and how they're being used and make sure they're being used properly. I mean, we're seeing towns now who are discovering, my house may be worth $1 million, but it's about to be worth zero because, the water just went to the data center. If you look at Lake Tahoe, they've announced the utility saying we're giving the energy to the data center, and you 49,000 homes, you have some period of time to find a source of energy. It's not us. Or in Corpus Christi, where there's no water, you have a $2 million house, but suddenly, what's your house worth if there's no municipal water, right?
Correct. And interestingly enough, ever since COVID, we have a city council here in Nevada City saying, oh, we're the most transparent city council and we're all about community. And I'm like, well, that's kind of funny because ever since COVID, and I saw this all across the state of California, I don't know if it's happening in the rest of the country, but when COVID happened, we went to Zoom calls, right, for our meetings, and we've come back now in person. But what happened over that time is that they've taken the city council agenda, and you have all these different, agenda items under business, new items, business items, earlier items. And now what they've done is they've taken all these items where you would discuss it at the city council, you'd open up to public comment and so on. They've now put them under consent items. And so we used to have like maybe 4 or 5 consent items, which are like non-controversial and they just vote one swell vote. But they would allow you to pull a consent item for public discussion, for city council discussion, and for a separate vote. Well, now they've shoved all of these items under consent items. So there's like 14, 15 of them. They've now made it so that a citizen cannot go to the mic and say, I'd like to pull consent item number blah, blah, blah for a public discussion and so on in a separate vote. Can't do that. You've got to actually be aware of this before the city council meeting. You have to go out and get a city council member and lobby them to pull that item for discussion. So there's that. And the other thing they've done is we've gone from 3-minute public comments to 2-minute public comments. And now our city council meetings are no longer 4 or 5 hours, which they were regularly when I was on the city council. And now they're an hour and a half. And this has been, Catherine, across the board.
Wow.
Across the board. And I saw this, and let me tell you, it was really fascinating. I found again and again, it was the city managers that went into those positions, and they were literally leading all the city council members to do this. And nobody discusses this. So when I hear our city council saying, we're the most transparent, we're all about public input, we're all about community, I'm like, you've cut us out. You've completely cut us out. And you've truncated the city council meetings. You've truncated our public comment and our involvement to pull items for discussion. We can't. And so it's like a puppet. It's like a puppet show, essentially. Like, oh, we're doing this, but really they've done this. And I also want to talk about one other thing. When people get really, so globalism, and again, I say this to folks too, like, look, it's really awful what's happening. This globalism that we've been dependent upon is being destroyed, right? We're watching it by design being destroyed. Now, if we wanted to go out there and destroy globalism, we would not be so nearly effective as citizens. It's being done for us. So you're kind of in this little grace period where, yeah, they want to destroy the global system to put this new, surveillance grid and control everything. But there's always this little window of opportunity. And this is where the Aikido move comes in. So they're destroying it. Thank you very much. Now we'll go back to community. We just don't fall for their trap and doing what they're saying. And we actually build community in that little period of grace. And so what I mean by this is that I'm looking at our local area here, and we have lots of farms, we have lots of ranchers. But what happened in the Great Depression was that you had farmers and you had ranchers, but they couldn't get their meats, they couldn't get their produce to market. So they had to kill their animals because they couldn't process them. They had to have their crops just fade in the fields and die. And so transportation is really, really key. So what I've been thinking to myself is, okay, so one of the weaknesses is actually one of our local opportunities. And what I'm going to be doing is I've been looking at e-bikes. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to buy an e-bike. I'm going to go out there and buy the biggest little cart that I can pull behind the e-bike. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be the local transportation. And we can actually go out there and we can get a whole fleet of these and continue on a micro level. But our farms are only 1 or 2 miles away. I can actually go and deliver it. And I don't need food. I can barter. So this is the kind of creativity I'm talking about. You can sit there and go, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. It's like, no, it's the beginning of new industries and boutique industries and businesses. And you have the opportunity now to reinvent your life at a local level without Mr. Global. So it's right. You have to change your lens and realize, no, this is our opportunity. If we just sit there waiting to be rescued, it won't go as we want. But if we actually take advantage of the end of this globalization and the beginning of community, we've got something. We're golden.
Right. Right.
But I just want to say, actually, you've kind of done it, but I was talking to someone recently who remembers when we used to talk about Solari circles, get into a circle. And they said they tried really, really, really hard. And there were people that would say, oh, I can, or I can do this, but they never showed up. No one ever thought there was an urgency to this. So I wonder if between you all, let's get a clip here. What will happen if you do nothing? What will happen in a couple of months? What will your world look like?
Well, you're going to get hungry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to have very little options, right? I mean, like right now is your window of time. This is the dollar still has value. You can still order things. You can still go shopping. You can still plant things. You can still build community. And what happens if you don't do something now, it's going to be much more difficult, much more expensive, or just flat out not available for you to go out there and get your irrigation system, to go out there and get your seeds, to get your manure, right? Your fertilizer, your soil. It's like you have now. So, and again, once you start to see those shelves getting really thin, that's when you're kind of getting more into the dire straits. And so I have to say, the thing is that people do not wake up in the morning one day and say, I think I'm going to be an activist. I think I'm going to go out there and do da-da-da. It's not until, like with the data centers, it's on your doorstep that people get activated. So really, I had a gentleman 20 years ago when I was really trying to rally the town around sustainability and resiliency and not the UN version. And he said one day, he goes, Renette, how are you going to convince people to go sustainable? And I said, Mark, I'm not convincing anybody to go sustainable. Essentially, we have to be ready when there's no other choice, right? And that means that we have to be ready, and we have to have the hose and the shovels and the soil and this and the seeds. And we have to start kind of building up our own surpluses with in mind that we're going to be doing this for our neighborhood. We're going to be doing this for our community. And we've got to be the teachers when all of a sudden people look around going, wait a second, now what do we do? And so if you're listening to this, you're the teacher, folks. You're the leader, whether you realize it or not. If you're listening to this conversation, you are the early adopter, and you're also the one on the cutting edge. And people are going to be turning to you to say, what did Catherine Austin Fitz say? But what was that again about, cash? So you're it, folks. And you have to step up and realize on a spiritual level, you're hearing this interview here and what we're saying for a reason. And there is a great calling. And the calling is that you're going to be a leader whether you want to. It doesn't mean to be out there on a bully pulpit and talk, but you lead by example. You lead by gardening. You lead by communicating and connecting with your neighbors and supporting them and teaching them. And that's what we have some time to do still. So that's kind of what you have to do. And we're at a threshold right now.
So let me make a recommendation that can help you in a practical way. We have a piece at Solari called Coming Clean. You can access it in PDF. You can print it out. We have hard copies you can buy, but you can just print it out or have it printed locally. We want you to share it widely. And we just got a wonderful email from a subscriber who said that they gathered a group. And in fact, they're not just doing it locally, they're doing it on Zoom. And they are meeting once a week and working through each one of the 24 items and coming clean. And that's all about building resiliency. So if you need a lot of materials and a lot of ideas to help you, start to do what Renette is talking about, that is a resource that you can use, with a group of people like a Solari Circle or a local group, and it can be non-local too. Because what I find is that the most effective networks are both local, and then different local groups are collaborating and sharing ideas. So you have like 10 local groups who are all talking with each other about what they're doing locally. And that seems to work very well. So I would encourage you to get Coming Clean, and we should publish Mr. Global in Your Street next week or the week after. And that's another, there's a wealth of resources online about how to do these things. So
Right.
you want to access them.
And what about people who are on medications? I mean, people diabetics, I know, things like that. I mean, that must be slightly petrifying for them.
So the first thing you have got to do is, if you have a way of transitioning from pharmaceuticals to natural methods or things that you can do yourself, you better get to doing it. I had a friend who was spending a fortune every month on his insulin, and they raised the price many years ago. And finally, he got interested in natural methods and basically switched his diet and got off all pharmaceuticals. So if you can get off pharmaceuticals, you want to do it. If you can't, then you need to figure out how you're going to line up the supply in this environment. So for example, we did a book review several years ago on a book called China RX. Most of our pharmaceuticals in the United States are dependent on low-cost ingredients coming from China to make them. At the time I did a book review of China RX, if China cut off our antibiotics, we would have several weeks, and then that's it. So if you need any pharmaceuticals, then you need to figure out how you're going to arrange and line up, because you may get cut off if you don't have a stockpile, you could find yourself in a position of having to go cold turkey.
And animals as well, people with pets, like we have
Right.
horses and dogs and stuff like that. How do you feed them?
Well, that's just it. I mean, you want to stock up as much as possible. Or for instance, like if you have dogs, you can make their own dog food, and I would actually recommend doing that anyways, because dog and cat food, for instance, is just not that healthy for them. And if you can give them really good food, homemade, they're going to be healthier, which means you don't have vet bills and illnesses and so on. So no, I'm telling you folks, this is it. You have to look at everything and do your own inventory. Like, where are our vulnerabilities? Where's our weaknesses? Do I have horses? Do I have other animals? Can we supply somewhere else? Can we connect to a farmer or a rancher who can actually assist us? This is what you need to do. And I have a dear friend who, the estrogen patches, she's like, they're not available anymore. So she's trying to figure out, she goes, you're going to see a lot of angry, crazy women out there because they can't get their estrogen patches. And so one of the things is that for a lot of these medications, there are alternatives, right? And I do know that you have to think to yourself, well, do I have to kind of peter out my medication and not just stop all of a sudden, because that could be a host of health issues, in itself. So you have to say, like, do I have to peter down on the levels I'm taking and try to replace it with, something more herbal or local or something like that. So I really do suggest that's one reason why you want to have these potlucks. You want to gather with people and other women who are in the same boat and say, how do we deal with this? And the medical side, like what Catherine is saying, I mean, what is it? 70-80% of Americans are on some kind of prescription. It's huge. It's huge. And so and it's not just the medications, which is a big problem. It's the plastic bottles. It's the bottle caps, right? It's like even naphthalene, which is a really awful chemical, but it's in all these different plastics. So you're going to see that maybe the food's available, but the packaging is not.
Well, that would be good in some cases if they would replace the plastic. I was going to ask you, isn't petrochemicals are used in making plastics, so we may have real shortages of plastics, which could be a good thing.
Well, it's a good thing, but you need to have a transition, right? I mean, it's a good thing until all of a sudden everything just runs out and you have nothing to, you have no storage or no containers or anything. And my partner and I actually really have transitioned away from, let's say, like saran wrap. We get these little cloths that have like beeswax on them, and you can order them and you can cover things and wrap them up. And so we don't use saran wrap. But when we go shopping, everything's in these little plastic clamshells, and and you've got your medication in plastics, and they're using plastic for everything. Love to get away from it, but it has to be in a transitional type of pace. That's not what this is about. So you have to really look around and ask yourself, where are our vulnerabilities? Where do we have to stock up? Like my partner, we have her, she's stocked up in hyperthyroid medication. She's also changed her diet to be anti-inflammatory diet. So she's actually gotten her numbers better. She's taking control of her health through her diet. That makes a huge difference. And if you're going to be completely dependent on medications and not eat healthy, not go for a walk, sit on the couch, you're not going to have anymore. You're going to be suffering. And so this is, folks, you have got to be proactive with your health and what you put in your mouth, because food is medicine.
Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic and fascinating conversation. I wish we could go on for another hour, but maybe, Catherine, we can come back to the subject, please.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But thank you for your wisdom and education, and Catherine and Carolyn as well. So everybody, the message is stock up, be wise, get knowledgeable, get friends, get going, time fishing. Oh, you know what? These are all things we should be doing anyway.
Yeah, it's fun.
Right, it's fun.
Yeah.
So from us, we'll be back next week on Financial Rebellion, but thank you to everyone that's listening, and thank you to everyone here. Okay, tell us your name, please. Catherine, okay. Let's go right back. Talk to me about how you got to where you are now and what happened, how much injury you've had with shots.
It would start back in boot camp. I went into the Navy back in '81 and got the shots as you're going through the thing, and ended up in the hospital. I got deathly sick, and they thought they would hold me back and everything, but I eventually got over it and went back. And then a year later, had to get a second flu shot, and that one I got very sick from, so they did put in my record, no more flu shots. Thank God.
What do you know what kind of sick that made them say no more flu shots? Because I'm sure there's a lot of military people wanting to know right now. What is it that makes them sign you off the flu shot?
I mean, it was the worst flu you can imagine. I never had flu before I had the flu shot. And they say, oh, you can't get the flu from the flu shot. Yes, you can, because the 2 times I had it, I got deathly sick. Same things happened to my husband. So at least the rest of the time in the Navy, I did not have to get a flu shot. But being medical, later on in life, I did have to get some of the hepatitis ones and stuff like that. I believe I had 1 anthrax. At the time, I was gone quite a bit. And that was during the reserves, but they just kept after me and after me. Fast forward, I've had various illnesses. Shingles at 18 after the second flu shot. I have an autoimmune disorder now where my nerves are demyelinating, and I did get treatment for that in 2021, where 2 of the other patients I was able to speak to at the time, older than me, were both there because of vaccine injury.
Tell us what you mean by nerves. What's that feel like?
Yeah, the coating on your nerves is the myelin sheath.
Right.
And so there's a illness or autoimmune disorder, they don't know why, but I know a lot of people that are getting this current one are getting CIDP. chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. And tons of people are getting it. And when I talked to the two people, it's a 3-hour, infusion. So you've got a lot of time to talk. And this one gentleman, he was told it was from the vaccines he'd gotten. And I'm like, you're not going to get this one, are you? This is 2021. He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, wow. So the rest of the appointment, I'm explaining to him, no, do not get this. And then there was a woman, she had gotten a pneumonia shot, got very sick, went back, her doctor said, oh, you got to get the second one or it's not going to work. That one put her in the hospital, and now she has CIDP. So anyway, the connection is very strong, with the CIDP, demyelination, and vaccinations. And like I said, this one it's actually a side effect, and it's listed on many vaccinations. So.
All right, so you carried on getting all these vaccines. So you weren't vaccine hesitant. You did as you were told.
Oh yeah. And then about 20 years ago, I saw Sherry Tenpenny on some program, and she opened my eyes. The scales fell from my eyes because being medical and military, I never questioned it. It was the way you did things, and it was healthy for you. And that was the first time I actually, And then she's showing the graphs where the illnesses were already going away before the vaccines ever came in. And then the countries that never got vaccinations actually went away faster, where ours hung on longer. So she just really opened my eyes, and I got to meet her a couple years ago. I'm like, you're my hero. And so I've been kind of preaching this for quite some time of, be careful, do your research and things like that. And when this pandemic came out in January 2020, I was like, here we go, mandatory vaccinations. And so I was warning people, I said, it's going to come out so much sooner than anybody is expecting. In fact, I thought it was going to come out, I was going to Israel in March of that year, and I thought it was going to come out that fast. But they at least waited till the end of the year. And, like I said, it was already made, and we knew that. I've been listening to Del Bigtree for many years, and he always said, when they come after the adults to mandate, that's going to wake a lot of people up. And it certainly did.
And how are you today? How is your health?
The demyelination's getting worse. I get EMGs every 6 months. I stopped getting the infusions because they're taking the plasma from vaccinated people. So since I'm not willing to get a vaccination, I'm not willing to get the plasma. And so it was helping. The information was it takes about 9 months to make a batch. So in 2021, I figured I had till about August before they would put the contaminated plasma in there. So I'm just trying to find alternative ways to stop the demyelination and some other issues. I've had like chronic rash on my face for a year that nobody can figure out. It's just been all kinds of weird things.
So what's your message to people?
My message is that there is no good vaccine. If you think there is, do your research. Get the books that the people that are doing the research know what they're talking about.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.